Hi everyone, we'll continue memorizing from the book of Hebrews. So we memorized up to verse 8. Today we are going to memorize verse 9. I'll read that first. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 9. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. So I'll read 8, 9 and 10 together. 7, 8 and 9 together. Hebrews chapter 5, 7 to 9. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard for his godly fear. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. So we already discussed why Jesus has come down as man. Adam and Eve, through their sin, through their original sin, has fallen from the state of grace, and the entire humanity has fallen into an abyss of sin, and only God can reconcile that fallen humanity. That is the reason Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, God the Son, has come down as man, and he suffered death. He suffered passion and death and obtained salvation for the entire humanity. And yesterday we meditated, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, right? So he obtained salvation through suffering. In his suffering, he learned how difficult it is to obey, right? So how difficult it is to obey the will of Father, because he has obeyed in the most difficult circumstance. Father has given him the most difficult call, right? He has to die as a sacrificial lamb for the entire humanity. That was the most difficult call, but he chose to obey Father. In his suffering, he learned obedience. So that is what we read here. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Through his suffering and his death, he obtained salvation, and he became the mediator between men and God, right? So he has become the high priest. One of the role of the high priest is to be a mediator, right? See, he offered himself as a sacrificial lamb, right? Other high priests were offering animal sacrifices, right? But Jesus offered himself. He offered himself as the sacrificial lamb. He became a mediator between God and men. He obtained all this through suffering, right? So he learned obedience through suffering. So we already meditated that suffering has got a new dimension or a new meaning after Jesus' death and resurrection. So we already meditated that when we meditated on Hebrews chapter 2 verse 10. So I'm not repeating that. You can go back and listen to that. I'll just read that. For it was fitting that he, for whom and by whom all things exist, in bringing many sons to glory, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through suffering. So suffering has got a new dimension. Suffering has got a new meaning. So we also meditated that all the saints have embraced suffering. They were not running away from suffering. It is through suffering that we conform our will to the will of God, right? We are of a fallen nature, and in our weakness, most of the time we conform our will to the will of Father through suffering. So suffering has got a new meaning. And also if you look around in the nature, that is how it is written by God, right? So a woman, she has to undergo a lot of pain and suffering to bring forth a child into this world. But once a child is born, she rejoices. Same way, only when the grape is crushed, we'll get wine. And in here, John 12:24 we read, I'll just read that. John 12:24, truly, truly I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. So it is through suffering, Jesus has become the life-giving bread. So with that, I'll conclude today's meditation. I'll read Hebrews chapter 5 verse 9. Being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Thank you. God bless you all.